As we get set to turn over to the 2025 season, it's time for our season-long rankings. And there's always lots of turnover among the quarterbacks. Time to break it down here on the True North Fantasy Pod. Let's get it. What's up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Pod, here to inform, empower, and entertain you towards making sound fantasy decisions. I am Trav, hosting and West Coastin'. So stoked to be back on the airwaves today. And Mamma Mia, fresh off the gondolas of Venice and stuffed with cannolis, the Italian stallion is back in Canada. Grazie, Mr. Frank Amaranti. How'd I do there? How was that?
Oh, you did great. And it's even better to be back talking fantasy football. We're right in the swing of things. We're getting close to the season. We talked earlier off air of how time's flying and it's almost a Hall of Fame game. So we got to get right into this and catch up on lost time.
Yeah, dude. Of course, anybody who's listening, please make sure you subscribe on that YouTube channel. Really goes a long way for us. Hit the like button, leave a comment as well. We love to see that. Of course, you can find our social media info in that episode description as always. And without further ado, Frank, yeah, the season, like you said, is almost here. That Hall of Fame game is just about a week out as of recording this show. So it's time for us to get into our 2025 rankings. I think for both of us, the 2025 rankings are kind of a big trigger of the season about to start, and also a core piece of some of our content, right? As kind of a guide to how we value these players entering into the season. And so starting today, we're going to have a series of shows where we're going to go in depth on our rankings, a little bit into our process, some about the players that we ranked and why we ranked them there. And it's going to be a bit of a new format for the True North Pod because we're going to have 2 shorter form episodes per week on these ones. So we're going to cut our time down a little bit per episode, but hopefully we're going to turn the value up for the listener, Frank. Roughly a half hour-ish episode each. We're going to drop 2 episodes per week, so we'll cut it in half. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So if you as a listener or a viewer liked it, please leave us a comment or let us know on social media. And this week we are starting with our top 12 quarterbacks, Frank. We'll get into quarterbacks 13 to 24 later this week, but we're starting with the cream, brother, the cream of the crop at quarterback. I think first we should probably get into some of this news, though, Frank, because that's another trigger to tell you that the season is almost underway, is that the news cycle starts to pick up a little bit. And this past week it has. And I think it's interesting because some of it could be relevant to the quarterbacks that we're talking about and their rankings that we've got. So the first one, kind of a quicker one, Frank, is Will Levis. He is getting, I believe, shoulder surgery, and he's going to be out for the year. Definitely thins the depth chart for the Tennessee Titans at quarterback. But I think it just kind of means that Cam Ward is more cemented as the starting quarterback. And I think effectively what this does is saves the coaching staff from making a stupid decision and starting Will Levis over the number 1 overall pick in Cam Ward. So I think it's a good thing for us to be able to lock down on Cam Ward being that guy. Is that kind of the only takeaway for you, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, we always walked in thinking that Cam Ward would be the starter, but it's reassuring now knowing that, I mean, we don't want to spin it positively. It sucks for Will Levis. He's out for the season. But, like, in terms of projecting if Cam Ward is going to play, this obviously increases his odds from, I'd say, in the 90% to even higher. Like, obviously, it's
Yeah.
a total lock now. So that's my one takeaway with Will Levis.
Yeah, pretty easy one to decipher there. How about the Seahawks releasing Noah Fant? Kind of seems like they gave him his wishes kind of deal. For me, first thing out of the gate is a big bump for Elijah Arroyo. I think he is going to be that seam stretching tight end for them. Really excited about what Clint Kubiak's offense can do for a tight end. Last week on the Dynasty Underground show, we were talking about this tight end room and saying when Fant was there that whoever's starting for the Seattle Seahawks at tight end is probably a guy we're going to want to take note of. And I think that guy is just more firmly Elijah Arroyo. I think that's an interesting take. I probably am not putting him into my top 12. We'll be getting into that discussion in a few weeks here, of course, Frank, but a big bump regardless. I think what's more important for me is kind of what happens with Noah Fant, because we know that he's a good receiving tight end. He's been around the NFL. He's a kind of a proven vet, although he hasn't had very great stats the past few years in Seattle. What do you think about Arroyo's outlook, and then Fant as a viable starter for another team potentially.
Yeah, so you got to be excited for Arroyo. I think especially for Dynasty, where it's showing trust in their recent pick and his role can grow. But for redraft, I don't know. Still want to temper expectations. Don't want to get overly excited. Or this applies for best ball as well, because now Arroyo's price is going to rise to the point where it might be a little too rich. Like they still like Barner, the other tight end there. They're still, will be relatively run heavy, I would say. But you got to like the skill set with Arroyo. And if he falls enough in best ball, if you're making a 3 tight end build, it makes sense as your tight end 3 with Arroyo. As for Noah Fant, I really thought at one point he could find himself with a new team, like say with Seattle when he went there. Like he's athletic, he's a good receiver, but it just hasn't happened. I mean, we've seen late blooming tight ends. Look at Jonnu Smith. Maybe that could eventually happen for Fant, but obviously it's unlikely at this point. But in terms of where Fant could land, I mean, you would have said the Dolphins before they signed Darren
I
Waller.
know. How funny is that? Hey, like, I mean, it's not like Waller cost them a ton or anything like that, and they got something back for Jonnu, but I mean, that could have
Yeah.
been a nice spot.
Yeah, but I think the takeaway for fantasy is you hope it doesn't go to a place where you can knock the existing tight end a little bit by taking snaps away.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see where Fant lands. But in terms of his own fantasy value, I wouldn't anticipate anything that would get us excited to draft him.
Yeah, no, I actually just put out a tweet just before the show because it was interesting. I was putting these notes together before we started. I was checking Twitter before we went to record, and Tommy Tremble from the Panthers was just put on the pup list. And I think that might be a kind of a nice spot for Noah Fant.
Thanks.
I know Dynasty gamers do like Jatavion Sanders as a sleeper, and I like him as well. But I think that team is trying to take another step as an offense. And so having more of a proven vet at the tight end would be good there. Bucks would be kind of nice as well. I know they like Cade Otton. He's more of a do-it-all guy as opposed to that slot seam guy. Texans would be kind of nice too. Texans would be kind of nice to add him into that passing game. They have Dalton Schultz, and he's the guy who does it all, and he's been a pretty adequate pass catcher before, but I think Noah Fant brings a level of athleticism that he doesn't, and maybe a level of touchdown upside that he doesn't if he was to go there. So one to monitor for sure, because that landing spot could bring him into our viewpoint as somebody that could be a viable starter from week to week. You never know. Jordan Addison. He pled guilty to one of the funniest charges that I've ever heard, called a wet reckless, Frank. Um, just an amazing name. I'm not going to get too into it. I'm not a lawyer. I'd probably butcher it, but it's everything that I've read says that he's most likely looking at a 3-game suspension. And so I wonder what you think that does to him. Maybe does that make him a value, being that his draft cost is going to dip a little bit? And then who do you think might emerge in this pass catching group?
I think the best way to approach Jordan Addison if you're drafting early, like in best ball, is just to wait it out till we know about the suspension. Because, like, look at Rashi Rice. We know now that he's going to be suspended, and it's taken some time for him for his ADP to really fall. Like, he's still like receiver 19. Rice is an underdog. So you want to wait till it readjusts the market for that. You don't want to get caught overspending on Addison, ends up getting suspended more than expected. Like look at Rice also. We didn't even think he was going to be suspended this year. Like we thought it would still be delayed, and that was wrong. So it's kind of a very volatile situation that I'd want to avoid with Addison. And in terms of the pass catching group, I'm high on JJ McCarthy. I think Justin Jefferson will have a big year. Like he was good last year, Jefferson, but he didn't have that kind of ceiling season that he's capable of. So I'm high on Jefferson. I think if Addison is forced to be out, obviously that filters a little more targets his way. And I think he'll just have a big season. I'm in on Jefferson.
Yeah, for sure. I think sucks for those who drafted Addison already, of course, but I've been kind of a dynasty fader of Jordan Addison, and so I guess that's just kind of translating a little bit into redraft. Right now on Underdog, he's the wide receiver 36. That's going to keep falling a little bit. So depending on how far that falls, remember he's only missing 3 games, and he does have some spike week upside. So I don't think he's that bad of a target still in best ball, even at the price that he's at. Seeing him continue to go down incrementally. Um, But yeah, I think it's going to be kind of tough sledding there. A guy I really like as hard for a rookie to break into this passing game. Ty Felton from Maryland. He was actually a pretty good deep threat downfield guy with some speed. So I could see him potentially filling that role a little bit for Addison early season, but he's a rookie and it's going to be, the first 3 games of his career. So you can't expect too much, more so just of a dynasty guy to monitor to see if he can kind of put a dent in that wide receiver room. There's also Jalen Naylor there as well as a guy who could take some snaps. And then the big one, Rashee Rice. You mentioned him when we were talking about Addison, and these two things kind of unfolded right around the same time. Rashee's was a little bit more dire, though. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 felonies. Got sentenced to 30 days in jail and 5 years of probation. So I mentioned I'm not a lawyer, Frank, but I know that that's not good, what he got there. And obviously the offense was even worse. So, I mean, as he should be punished. All I've seen is multi-game suspension, Frank. So I'm almost thinking more in like the 4 to 6 game range. What do you think on kind of the length that might be laid down here, and how do you think that impacts him for the 2025 season?
Yeah, I think the length for Rashee Rice's suspension, to your point, like 4 to 6 sounds most likely at this point. And as I mentioned earlier, Rice's ADP hasn't really fallen like you would have expected. Receiver 19 is still kind of rich, especially because Rice is also coming off a serious knee injury. So that may have taken time to get him going as well. And with Rice being away from the team for so long, Xavier Worthy started to really come into his own last season. Now Rice could be out longer again and miss 6 game suspension. Worthy can continue establishing more rapport and establishing himself, as one of the top targets. So honestly, I'm not going to be targeting Rice. The community loves him, and I get it. He's
Mm-hmm.
earned targets, so they're kind of been slow to bumping him down. They still like the idea of taking him for the later in the season when he's probably rolling again. Obviously, you're with Mahomes. So I don't think Rice is going to come down to a cost that I'm willing to take the shot, and I'm just going to pass on him.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I kind of have been as well. I've just kind of always thought that, and I love Rashi Rice. I was somebody who added him off of waivers as a UDFA after he was, when he was a rookie, and he came up big for me in that rookie season. But I've always kind of thought that we're touting him as a potential wide receiver 1 off of like a 10-game sample size in a wide receiver room that's been notoriously hard to pin down, even when we've thought that we've had it pinned down, right? So I've always been kind of a fade on Rashi's price. And so if he keeps falling, that's just a hard suspension to eat on your roster, especially in those leagues where you don't have that IR spot, right? It's really hard to spend that capital. Even if he drops down to like say the 6th round or something, that's still pretty premium capital for your roster. And so I'm also looking elsewhere there, Frank. As far as beneficiaries, it's hard to say, right? It's a really hard one to pin down. Travis Kelsey could get some more of those underneath targets. We saw them last year use Worthy in that kind of lower A dot role as well, which kind of seems to go against his profile. And then we've got Hollywood Brown in there as well. So it's kind of anybody's guess. But I think all of those guys could have big weeks here and there when Rashee is suspended. And I think when he gets back, it's probably just a little muddier.
Yeah, there's even the rookie Jalen Royals. Maybe
Yeah.
this puts him into an increased role that he can, give you a usable week or two in best ball at the least.
Yeah, he's a good player too. Really good player. So okay, Frank, that's all the news. Enough with the sad stuff. Let's talk about the top 12 quarterback rankings that we've got. I think it's going to be some interesting conversation. Like I said, both kind of a core piece of our content previous to us joining up on True North. And it just so happens that coincidentally, we can now marry that up on the True North airwaves. We have been talking about doing some stuff over on the True North Substack, so stay tuned as well. That will be for free subscribers only. So please go check it out and subscribe to the free plan there. And then anything that we drop written, you will see. But yeah, Frank, so let's get a little bit into it here because I think the first thing for us to talk about is maybe a little bit of process here, right? Talk about some of the things that make us make our decisions, right? And I'm calling this kind of the needle movers, right? So, what are the things when you were going through your top 12 quarterback rankings that really moved the needle and made you say, okay, I want this guy over this guy?
Well, for me, I think the way I want to go into this year is waiting on quarterback. We see teams run heavy in the red zone more, especially avoiding those pocket passers who are priced up coming off a big year because they really need to maintain that passing production to keep up that, sort of elite level production. So obviously, as everyone knows, rushing upside helps, but also thinking about which players played injured last year. Like Jordan Love clearly played injured, and you could see it in Jordan Love's rushing production significantly down from year to year. So baking that into the process, thinking about play callers, obviously Trevor Lawrence gets a huge upgrade there with Liam Cohen. So, and then also considering the opportunity costs. I know the early QBs are great, but I could combine two that I'll talk about later, and I'd be really happy with that. I used to be just wanting to take one quarterback in redraft leagues, but now I'm open to taking two because often, especially home leagues, like a lot of these quarterbacks fall past ADP because a lot of your league mates are just going with one, and you end up getting value on that. So I'm going to be doing that with two QBs. Basically, to sum it up, I'm back on late round quarterback this season.
Yeah, as I was going through, I guess my top 24, I was coming to that conclusion as well because, after 6 basically, um there's some really good value in these guys. And some of that rushing upside we do see happens in the top 5 in those elites, but there's a little bit of pockets of it here and there towards kind of the back end. And then some of those scheme and play caller stuff that you were talking about, that's really huge. And I think we have some interesting turnover to talk about there, as well as some of those 2024 rookies that kind of came into the forefront. So I think this is going to be very, very good conversation, Frank. So I'm going to lay out my first tier of quarterbacks, and I want you to maybe rebut on that. Let me know if it's the same or if you have any differences, and we'll just kind of roll through it like that. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. So my first tier, and I kind of waffled on how big I wanted this tier to be. I knew that Lamar Jackson was going to be my quarterback 1. I knew that Josh Allen was going to be my quarterback 2, but I couldn't decide whether Jayden Daniels should be in that top tier as the quarterback 3, or maybe tier 2 was going to start with him as the quarterback 3. In the end, I did bring him up into that tier, Frank. I think some of the additions that they made both on the offensive line as well as Debo Samuel coming in are going to be nice for him. I think Debo plays really well into Jayden Daniels' skill set as kind of a safety valve underneath if he's kind of scrambling and trying to find guys out there. So I think everything's lining up to him for him to continue that success from 2024. And so that's why Jayden Daniels makes it into that tier as a tier 1 quarterback, as quarterback 3. What do you think about my top tier, Frank? And how does it look versus yours?
Yeah, I agree with it, except a couple points. For one, I have Josh Allen at 1 and Lamar at 2, just because Allen has just had those finishes more than Lamar has. His last three, I think it's QB2, QB1, QB2, like something crazy track record for Josh Allen. And the Ravens have an elite defense. Maybe down the stretch they could run the ball that in the second half. They don't really need to explode. Not that these are like little tiebreaker things between Allen and Lamar. There's no
Mm-hmm.
real pushback from me there. It's just personal preference. I have Allen at 1. I agree with you. Jayden Daniels at 3 in the elite tier. I think he has to carry that offense more than Jalen Hurts will, especially coming off the Super Bowl, which is why Daniels is ahead of Hurts for me. But I do have Jalen Hurts in tier 1 as well, just because we've seen what he can do. We've seen the point per game track record. The tush push is still there. So I think Jalen Hurts still belongs in the elite tier. Out of these 4, I think these are the only 4 viable quarterbacks that could finish as overall QB1. I've grouped them together. These are dual threat QBs with elite upside. I don't really see another viable candidate as overall QB1 because none of the others really, are as good at passers or run as much as these 4.
Yeah, for sure. And I think why I would have Lamar just a touch over Josh Allen, obviously the rushing ability, but I think there's some newfound passing game upside in Lamar that is kind of like switched from Josh Allen to Lamar. You're totally right. Each of the past 6 years, Josh Allen has been a top 5 quarterback, 3 of which have been the quarterback 1. Last year, he was the quarterback 4, what I'm reading, and then Lamar was the quarterback 1 last year. And Lamar had over 4,000 passing yards last year, and he had 41 passing touchdowns, which is something that I honestly never thought that we would really see out of Lamar with his rushing. I thought he was always going to be kind of low volume passing, but he has been high efficiency, Frank. He had 6 games last year with 3+ passing touchdowns, which is better than his MVP season in 2023. So I think if you put the 800 plus rushing yards alongside a lot more touchdown upside than what I see with maybe Josh Allen, like Josh Allen's 2 years removed from his last 30 touchdown season. And I think a lot of that coincided with like the Stephon Diggs years where he was putting up those 30, 35 touchdowns. It's kind of hard to see that with some of these weapons that he's got right now. Just, I like Elijah Moore. I like Josh Palmer as sleepers. Khalil Shakir is a good slot weapon, but I don't think, and I've talked about Keon Coleman as well. I'm not a huge believer. I think all of that means that like Josh Allen just has to do all of it on his own. You know what I mean? I think the last 2 seasons, he's had double digit rushing touchdowns, which has kept him afloat in that top five. But if he dips under those double digit rushing touchdowns for any reason, then I think he's going to be potentially outside of that top five with what I think his passing is going to look like. It's not going to be bad, but it doesn't have that ultimate ceiling of like 4,500 rush or passing yards and 35 passing touchdowns like he has in the past. So those are the hairs that I'm splitting with these guys, Frank, because to your point, like I'm not balking at Josh Allen being that quarterback one. So I think it's really close there. And the only reason I don't have Jalen Hurts in there is for similar reasons, right? If he sees any dip in those rushing touchdowns, he's in trouble for fantasy purposes because that team does not throw the ball very often. They are very efficient, but they would love to just throw the ball like 17 times a game if they possibly could and just run it down the other team's throat. Granted, Jalen Hurts is a part of that, but he just doesn't present the passing that some of these other guys present. So that's why I had him outside of that top tier. But I do, you can see the hat if you're watching us on video. I am an Eagles fan. And so I love that take, Frank.
Yeah, quick note worth noting that Josh Allen did actually finish QB2 in points per game. It's just that
Okay.
we
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
looking at that last week. Allen didn't play, so they counted it as a zero, which
Right.
is why he falls in total points. But definitely agree. Obviously, the passing production hasn't been there as much for Josh Allen, even with like Joe Brady as offensive play caller. They're more run heavy. Uh, I just think that the rushing touchdown should still be there, but
Yeah.
definitely understand putting Lamar ahead and your concerns with Hurts.
For sure. So who do you got at 5, Frank? Because I got Joe Burrow there. Who do you have?
Yeah, so this is my next tier. I got four quarterbacks in this one. I did the tiers differently. I grouped them by skill set. This is pocket quarterbacks that have a combination of floor with some upside. So starting with Joe Burrow at 5, obviously coming off a huge year. Even though I'm not really in on a lot on this tier, I only want one of the quarterbacks in this tier because the one that I do want goes a lot later, but I think he has similar upside. So I'll continue. After Burrow, we got Patrick Mahomes, who last 2 seasons been like QB 11 in points per game. It hasn't been there, but just because he's done it in the past, I have to leave him in this group and at number 6. It's hard to really rank him too much lower. With that said, if I don't have like Worthy or someone, or if I'm not building a chief stack, I tend to not really look at Mahomes.
Same.
Uh, then QB7, Baker Mayfield coming off the huge year. I know he lost Liam Cohen, but they bring in Emeka Egbuka, good first round receiver. Should still be a pass heavy offense in a lot of shootouts. But again, this is a pocket passer price that is premium. So I don't really want to pay this the price makes sense on Mayfield, but I just like, why would I take this player when I could wait 20 picks and go with Dak Prescott? This is one of the quarterbacks I'm most above consensus on. I have him at QB8. Obviously, huge receiver upgrade bringing in George Pickens. Going to be a pass heavy offense. You could see it with the minimal investment in their backfield with Javonte Williams. They used the first rounder, the Cowboys did, to upgrade their offensive line, bringing in the guard Booker. And Dak has a top 5 finish 1 year removed from one in fantasy points per game. So here you have a player in a good situation, pass heavy offense, who has done it before, and it's an improved group of pass catchers. So that rounds out my second tier, Dak Prescott at QB8.
Nice. I like that. That's a bigger tier than my second one, but I'll maybe roll into my third one here, Frank, because yeah, I've got Jalen Hurts is actually the start of my tier 2 at quarterback 4, but really could be in that tier 1 really close. Joe Burrow at 5, Mahomes at 6 for me. I think a bounce back season is coming. Like he hasn't had much ceiling on his passing the last couple of years, and he now has a group of solidified weapons, despite the issues with Rashi Rice, of course. So that's actually a tier for me. So it's a tier of Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes. There's a little bit of flavor if you want pocket passing with big touchdown upside in or in Joe Burrow. got the rushing with Jalen Hurts, and then you got a bit of both with Patrick Mahomes, who I think is a wild card in either direction as far as these rankings are concerned, to be completely honest with you. My next tier is where it gets a little bit interesting, and I think it definitely differs from yours because I kept a little bit of that rushing side upside in here. My next two guys are Caleb Williams and Drake May. I know those are big leaps to take. I think Caleb Williams, along with my quarterback 8, or quarterback 9, who I'll get to in a second. So Caleb at 7, Drake at 8. I think Caleb's going to be one of my flag plants this year, Frank. I just think some of those stars are aligning. Obviously, there's a reason why he was the number 1 overall pick in 2024. That was, and Ben Johnson, coming in as that guy who's solidified as the head coach. Last year, Shane Waldron's play calling was awful for Caleb Williams. He was a really bad deep passer in 2024 and held onto the ball way too long. But I think some of that stuff can be fixed, right? I think we've talked about all the additions. I've gone ad nauseum about my thoughts on the Bears offense. I'm a big fan of Colston Loveland, big fan of Luther Burden. But now it's time to put up for Caleb Williams. And I think what Ben Johnson can do is take some of that deep inefficiency that we saw last year and turn it into more short and intermediate efficiency for Caleb Williams with some of these guys, allowing him to get the ball out to the open guy on some timing throws, allowing him to have some guys more open and some creative play calling there. So I think Caleb is going to have a big bounce back this year. And so that's why I have him at quarterback 7. And Drake May, I think I'm betting on the rushing, right? Plus some adequate passing numbers. Drake May is a guy who could really fall into the top 10, even if he had a terrible passing season, by way of rushing. He had the most scrambles of any quarterback per game last year. Not the most in the league, but he only started, I think, or he only played most of like 10 games, I believe. But on the passing side, 7 of those 10 games, he had over 70% completions with absolutely terrible weapons. So I think the signs are pointing up for Drake May with the additions of Stephon Diggs, Travion Henderson. Kyle Williams is a sleeper that we like at wide receiver as well. So I think all of that stuff was to help Drake May, including offensive line additions. So what do you think about those 2 second-year guys, Caleb and Drake May, being in my top 10, Frank? And then we can get into that next year.
I'm with you. I'm above consensus on them as well. Both of them are in my top 10 also. Caleb Williams, QB9, which is above underdog ADP QB12. Drake May, QB10, which is above underdog ADP QB14. Even though Caleb Williams had a down year, he showed some spike week potential despite poor coaching. Now, obviously, huge coaching upgrade, receiver upgrade, offensive line upgrade. This is exactly the swing for the fence you want to make at the quarterback position, especially in one QB redraft leagues. The waiver wire will be plentiful if in case Caleb disappoints. So you want to swing for the fence. And if you miss, hey, you can pick up a streamer that was dropped in a bye week heavy week and a league mate needed a roster spot. You often sometimes find some, like a Tua or a Goff on free agency that could easily support you in case Caleb disappoints. But yeah, I love him there, and I love Drake May, QB10. Like you said, the rushing production is there, and they didn't even really call a lot of design runs for him because they spoke publicly, the Patriots coaching staff. They don't want to risk May for injury when they were totally out of it, which made total sense. Now, obviously, Diggs is looking healthier. He's ahead of schedule. Uh, Coaching staff upgrade with McDaniels there. I love taking Drake May. I love pairing him with Dak Prescott as that, proven producer with the upside shot at a young quarterback.
Love it, Frank. Well, why don't you round out the rest of your top 12? Because I think you only got 2 more. And then
Yeah,
I'll give you mine. I've got 9, 10, 11, and 12 left.
sure. So after Drake May, we got Justin Fields at QB 11. I know everyone talks about his elite rushing and how he's produced, but I'm slightly lower than his QB 10 ADP just because, this is now Fields' third team. He's not really considered that great of a real life quarterback. So you have to bake in slight risk that even if he runs and is doing well in fantasy, that, you know, maybe he's not producing in real life. And not to say like the Jets really have a great backup. I'm forgetting who it is at this.
Tyrod.
Yeah,
Still
Tyrod.
Tyrod.
Not like they're gonna bench him for Tyrod, but like the Fields is playing terribly. Like there's less job security than say 2 cemented top 5 first round picks who also run in Caleb and Drake May. So that's why I have them ahead of Fields. But
Yeah.
Fields is also another, QB to target while waiting, another swing for the fence. Rounding out the QB 12 is Kyler Murray. I know Murray runs and I know he has more proven production than the other three we mentioned, Williams, May, and Fields. But I don't trust Arizona's coaching staff. I don't trust their offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing. They seem to really lean on James Conner more in the red zone. It's not like the days when Cliff Kingsbury was calling plays for the Cardinals. You look at Kyler's numbers with Kingsbury compared to Petzing. So look at this. Kyler Murray fantasy points per game with Cliff Kingsbury 18.6, 24.4, 22.2, 20.7. With Drew Petzing 18.9 and 18.1. I don't think Murray has the same ceiling in this offensive environment, which is why he's below the others and finishes at QB 12 in my ranks.
Music to my ears, Frank. Actually, on my other show, The Dynasty Underground, I was against Kyler Murray and the boys were for Kyler Murray. And I was just like banging my head against the table because Kyler Murray did actually finish as like a top 10 quarterback last year, but it just never feels like it with Kyler. And you won't see him on my list today, Frank. So I'm with you on a little bit of a fade of Kyler Murray. So I liked everything that you said right there. Justin Fields will be seen on my list in just 1 second, but my quarterback 9, Frank, is actually, so I looked at the Fantasy Pros ECR expert consensus ranking, which is something that you and I are both a part of, Frank. We contribute to that big consensus that everybody sees when they're pulling those cheat sheets. There are 65 rankers who have ranked 2020 or who have published 2025 ranks, and I am the highest with CJ Stroud as my quarterback 9.
Mm.
Um, I think consensus has him at like 18 or something. And so I totally get that I'm putting myself out on a limb. But aside from Caleb Williams, this is my quarterback flag plant for 2025. I just think it's so quick how people can fall out of favor for fantasy gamers right after his rookie season, which he was a top 10 quarterback with only 23 passing touchdowns and no rushing to speak of. He had a down year last year with a bunch of different things going on, including a Tank Dell injury, which you could see impacted CJ Stroud immensely on the field there. And obviously, that's not like the reason for his bad play, but there was a bunch of other different factors, I think, there. And I think coming into 2025 with a clean slate, not a lot of questions around like the scheme or in the offensive coordinator. If you remember, there was talk about Bobby Slowick and whether he was going to be there for long or not. And I think he was let go a little bit late in the process or something too, which was kind of weird. But new year, he's got Jayden Higgins, he's got Jalen Noel. They added Christian Kirk for CJ Stroud. And like I mentioned, like he hasn't had a spike touchdown season in either of his 2 years yet, Frank. And I think that could be coming this year with his familiarity and his ability to kind of take over this offense with D'Amico Ryans as head coach. So I'm going on a limb here, but I really think that they're going to let him rip this season with the weapons that he's got. And I think if you look at 20 or his rookie season, he was an insane deep passer. Last year, he fell from grace, obviously. I think Jayden Higgins is going to help that a lot this year, as well as much as I don't love him, even Christian Kirk, because he can be a nice little downfield threat as well. So CJ Stroud is my quarterback 9. I'll let you come back to that in 1 sec. I have Bo Nix as my quarterback 10, Frank. The rookie showed well last year, got a couple new pieces around him. And I think a big thing for him is the insulation of him in this offense. Like Sean Payton knows how to get the most out of him and knows how to not get the worst out of Bo Nix. And so I think all of those things coming along with the fact that he's a guy that we can kind of expect 300 to 500 rushing yards from year over year, right, Frank? I think he got like 430 last year as a rookie. So that's everything that you want in a top 10 quarterback. Justin Fields, exactly the same ranking as my quarterback 11. Everything that you said there, we've seen this guy perform as a top 11, 10 quarterback when he's gotten a chance. He just hasn't been able to command that job for too long. And I think, like you said, this organization is starving for something. We don't even know what they're starving for anymore because I'm not even sure if it's winning yet anymore. Like, I think they're just starving for something that excites them. And so I think the coaching staff is going to have a little bit more leash to try and figure this out. And I think they're going to give some of that runway to Justin Fields because he's by far the best option that they have on this team. You had him at quarterback 8, Frank. I have Dak Prescott as my quarterback 12. And I think while I'm a little bit lower than you, this is still a very bullish ranking for me on Dak Prescott as a guy coming back from injury. He sneaks in there with the addition of George Pickens, the lack of a running game that's going to scare anyone. They're going to be in some shootouts. And like you said, he's going to pick up where he left off before that injury as a top 10-ish quarterback. So quarterback 12 this year, I think he has some room to even return on that investment. So that rounds out my top 12. What did you think about my 9, 10, 11, 12, Frank? CJ Stroud, Bo Nix, Justin Fields, Dak.
Well, first of all, I love the boldness with CJ Stroud, and I get it. He had a super impressive rookie season, coaching upgrade now because Bobby Slowick just went run heavy. Now they bring over someone from the Rams staff. What's his name again? Nick Caley, I think his name. That should help. Jaden Higgins, like you said, I have Stroud low, and I'd be willing to I'm open to moving him up. It just there's so many players, and it's hard to because Stroud finished I think QB like 26 in points per game, so I have him QB 20, but I am open to moving him up. We'll talk more about him, in the next episode. But I get the case. Receiver upgrade, coaching upgrade. My concern is the offensive line, trading Laramie Tunsil.
Good point.
This could be a team being developed like more building on the defensive side of the like Demico Ryan's
Yeah.
defensive minded head coach. Their defense is quite good, so they might be going that route. But I understand the appeal and I like the boldness. And then Bo Nix, I have QB 13. I just I moved them down because I'd rather swing for the fences with Williams and May, who I think are better, more talented quarterbacks. And Bo Nix feels like the type that if there was one who had a sophomore slump, it would be him because he did really
Totally.
exceed expectations last season. But, down the stretch, he was terrific and they improved the supporting cast. They got a great offensive line. So obviously see the appeal with Knicks. I already spoke about Dak, who you have as what QB 13. And then no, you have him QB 12, sorry.
Fields 11, Dak 12. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Fields and Dak, we
Yeah.
both are in. So totally get your list there, and I do like the boldness of putting Stroud where you did.
Yeah, and your comments on Bo Nix were completely valid there too. Like that kind of brings us into the rapid fire question because Bo Nix was probably my hardest guy to rank out of this top 12 because the range could be really wide for him, right? It could be a lower passing volume and they really insulate him. But I think also with that wide range of outcomes, Sean Payton is a coach that narrows that range a little bit with the safety he will provide Bo Nix. But yeah, he was probably my hardest guy to rank in the top 12, Frank. I think Burrow at quarterback 5 as well. I think there's something about just the title of being a top 5 quarterback. There's a little bit of like prestige around it. Take that for what you will in these meaningless rankings that we like to put out every single year. But it almost felt weird when I was looking at Caleb and feeling bullish on him and thinking about, can I put him above Burrow and Mahomes as a top 5 quarterback? Attaching the label top 5 quarterback kind of doesn't feel right for some guys, whereas some other guys it does, right?
Yeah,
It was kind of a weird, more of like a psychology thing for me ranking necessarily. But who were some guys that you had a tough time with?
guys that I had a tough time with. Well, Dak is one of them because I wanted to stay like I didn't want to go overboard because if I rank him, because I do like Caleb Williams and Drake May as well. So the way I group the quarterbacks based more on their skill set is like do I rank Dak much higher than May? I like them pretty close. Also, I was struggling with Mahomes. Like the resurgence could happen, but they could just still be that dink and dunk ball control, win a close game, especially now Rice suspended. He was tough. I just went with him just because of the production at QB6, but I could easily see anyone who ranks him lower. And yeah, and I guess the other one would be Baker Mayfield, just because you know I know he was great last season, but he doesn't have that much of a track record and the coaching downgrade. But given the setup, with probably a lot of shootouts with that defense, it's hard not to put Mayfield there, or I did
Yeah,
at
for
QB
sure.
7.
Well, I mean, you obviously noticed that Baker is an omission off of my list here. So
Um,
we will be talking about him on the next episode because I'm kind of in line with some of those thoughts and I'll expand. But I loved your take on Mahomes too, because like part of it feels like we're kind of making the bet just saying he's due for one. You know what I mean? It almost just feels like he's due for one is kind of like what it feels like. And that almost feels like a bad reason to stake your claim on a quarterback. But if any quarterback you're going to stake your claim on, seeing that he has these additional weapons and things like that. And we're potentially going to see a bit of an offensive shift in that team away from their utilization of the tight end. We said this last year, but it's coming at some point, Frank. And so they might be shifting to more of a wide receiver team as opposed to a tight end and run game team, which would mean more significant upside for Patrick Mahomes as well. So I love that. And I think we got him in the same spot. So what about so of these top 12, Frank, who has the highest chance to fall outside of the top 18 in 2025? So barely a starter.
That's a good
There's
question.
an easy one. I think the easy one's Justin Fields, right? Because he
Oh
is
yeah,
such a
so we won't go
yo-yo
with
as far
Fields
as
because he's the one who could get benched or
that's just a
something.
cheapie, right? That
Crazy.
just feels like a
Yeah,
cheapie. I had Knicks there. Man. Like if
yeah.
he plays bad in an offense that insulates its quarterbacks, I think that's going to be really, really dire for his perception among fantasy gamers. I'm leaning towards that doesn't happen. I just want to be clear about that. But I think, like I said, that range is wide. That range is really wide.
Yeah, definitely. And then hey, it could be maybe one of the pocket passers because when it really goes bad, they could really fall. Like look at Stroud last year. Like I said,
Yeah, it
QB
could be him
26.
for me. Yeah,
Or maybe Mayfield
yeah.
if like the Bucks struggle with a new coach and he's way less efficient in passing and he runs a little less because there's offensive line injuries. Maybe that derails the offense with Tristan
Hmm.
Wirth injured. So I guess
Hmm.
that could be my pick.
Highest chance out of your quarterbacks 6 through 12 to finish in the top 3 this season.
6 through 12 finish in the top three. I mean, the cop out answer would be Mahomes because he's done it before, or Dak because he's done it before. But if I want to do one who hasn't done it before, it'd be Caleb Williams, just because what puts Williams slightly ahead of May for me is Williams has a way better supporting cast, better play
Hmm.
caller, better receivers, better offensive line. And Williams, it's not like he runs that much less than May. So Caleb Williams would be my pick for that.
I like it. I had my notes say also Justin Fields because he could just like light shit on fire in a terrible Jets offense and be like running like crazy. But I got Drake May there as a guy who could jump into that top 3. You never know, right? Like one thing that I've been kind of linking as a similarity, which is also kind of scary to do, but if we get some version of the impact that's adding a new wide receiver had on Josh Allen for Drake May, and
Yeah.
coincidentally, it's the same guy in Stephon Diggs, who's not necessarily the same guy that he was back then, but much better than what Drake May had last year. If we get some of that impact of adding a new wide receiver and he has a good passing season, we already know he's going to have a good rushing season, basically. And so I think that stuff could buoy him into that top 3 season. And then, dynasty gamers are going to be losing their mind if that were to happen for Drake May. So always fun in the fantasy football streets when the fantasy value yo-yo is going up and down.
Definitely.
Okay, Frank. Well, that does it for episode 1 for this week. A bit of a new format for us. It feels like we're cutting her off a little bit short, but I think that was a nice, tight little episode on our top 12s. Love for anybody who's listening to leave a comment on what they thought about our rankings, if anything was crazy or if they thought they were dope, which they are.
Mhm.
Please let us know. Subscribe to that channel. Frank, any parting shots for the people as we ride out of these top 12 quarterbacks and into our quarterbacks 13 through 24?
Yeah, I think my parting shot is just don't pay the premium for the pocket passer, especially in your um, one QB redraft leagues. I'd rather not. Why would I take Baker Mayfield when I can wait 17 picks and take Dak? So I could
Mm-hmm.
take someone else that round and wait. I don't really see that much separation between Mayfield and Dak.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that can clear that up for you is just taking a look at the wide receiver that you would get in the same round as you would get with Dak and look at the quarterback that you took in those top 3 rounds. Think about it the opposite way. Look at the wide receiver you could have got in the top 3 rounds along with Dak, and you're probably going to like the Dak side every single time. So, with that, for the Italian Stallion, Frank Amaranti, I am Travis Seal. This has been the True North Fantasy Pod. Peace.